Thank you, Joe. Thank you, band. Good morning. It is always good to be back, and if you're a visitor, I want to welcome you on behalf of Unity of Springfield. In Unity, we like to say, and I see it's printed on your front doors, welcome home. It's how I feel every time I come here. I told First Service I no longer have to use my GPS to get here from wherever I'm coming. My car just somehow knows which exit to take from whatever direction. As I was asked to come and speak this week, Sue and Dee shared with me that many of you are studying this book, Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. And I have had the privilege and honor to teach some of Brené's work in the last couple of years. And I emailed Dee and said, which chapter are you on this week? And she said, well, you're lucky. It's chapter 5. It's the shortest chapter in the book. And because I know the book so well, I said, oh, it matters not that it's the shortest chapter in the book. It's the one that mentions vodka. It is divine that I am here this week. I know. That's all the vodka jokes you get today. Many of you met my friend Gina Pearson many months ago. She was here with me, and we did a retreat here at the church. I went to hear Gina not long ago as she was preaching at a church that we kind of go back and forth, tag team a little bit on. It's a church that has just hired a new minister. They start in about a month's time, and so Gina and I are filling that pulpit for a while. And as I was sitting in that service, I realized that you have a very different experience of church than I have of church. You see, over the last 25 years, I have been doing this work from this perspective, up here on this stage, whatever stage it might be. And I can count on both hands how many times in 25 years I've sat in your chair. When I retired from weekly parish work, and now I just travel and, do the same 6 sermons over and over and over. My father said, so what are you going to do for church now? Where are you going to go now? And it was an interesting question because I really just wanted a break. And I took a year off. And he kept every phone call we had. Well, where are you going to go to church now? And I realized this isn't where I got church. This is where I came to do a job. You see, my church happened throughout the week. And so this is my job. It's an interesting perspective, right? But as I was sitting in your seat listening to my friend Gina preach, I realized that we both have a job. I have this job, and you too have a job that you may not know you're in charge of. Because in my job of delivering a message, whatever it be, you have a job in responding. And whether you know it or not, you are doing just that. You're responding through vibration. You are responding through what you're doing with your body language. You'll shake your head yes. You'll shake your head no. You'll cock your head to the side. Mostly when I'm speaking, it's cocking your head to the side. And I realized that as I was sitting in your physical place, I was rather annoyed. You see, I was annoyed that even my dear friend Gina would expect me to believe everything she said. It must be annoying to you to come here each and every week, whether it's your minister, Sue, me, or a complete stranger to this community, because we just expect you to believe us. It must be annoying to leave here and be in community with your non-unity friends who ask, well, what did you learn at church this week? Because that conversation with your non-unity friends, It's really hard to explain unity in a brief amount of time, isn't it? And so I can just imagine what that conversation sounds like. Probably something like this. Usually in church, at that place of a solemn prayer, this guy got up and he asked us to close our eyes and focus on one thing, the back of our eyelids. And then he began to say over and over, breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. As if there's another way to do that. We were told that there was one presence and one power in all the universe, and though we cannot see him, touch her, smell it, we're just expected to feel. That we are praying not to a God up there, out there, but to this one that is within us, as us, through us, a part of us. I can hear you saying that I'm told I have 65,000 thoughts a day and every one of them is a prayer. Well, that's worrisome. We sing songs, both secular and out of the hymn book. We're told to read the Bible but not take it too literal. We're told to love Jesus with all our heart, but don't take him too seriously either. And then, beyond all of that, there's this band of hippies up here too. And you believe that you're going to be led into the celebration of worship. Do you believe it? I believe about 4 of you. As I was rereading chapter 5 with vodka in hand, I was thinking about what Brene says. She names this title, the chapter of this, chapter 5, Mind the Gap. And I'm going to give you a quick history lesson. Mind the gap is a phrase we use in this culture, but not as much as most cultures. Mind the gap is a phrase used a lot abroad. And if you've ever traveled abroad, especially to Europe or the UK, it's everywhere. It was developed in the late 60s as a warning, if you will. Every time a train comes into the station, whether it's a subway or a train or whatever it is, they have painted everywhere, on the floor, on the train itself, on the walls, even through audio coming through the speakers, mind the gap. They have hired the greatest actors ever known in their countries to record that 3-word phrase over and over. They rotate it from masculine to feminine voice. They do everything to remind you that there is this void between where you are and where you want to be. It looks like this. That's a picture out of the UK. Mind the gap. Great big bright yellow letters. And I have talked on this stage many times about the gap. Dee lets me pick out the daily word every time I come, and I always choose one from 1940 or before. And so you'll see on the front of your bulletin today, we read it earlier, I stand on the threshold of spiritual rediscovery. This is from the 1940s. The gap that Brene talks about in her book is what I call the threshold. I've talked about this on this stage. Let's say I'm in one room and you're in the next, and there is this threshold between us. In transformational work, we know that there are 3 stages of figuring out how to move from where we are to where we want to be. Stage 1 is letting go. I've talked about that ad nauseum here and elsewhere. You've heard it. It's all we ever talk about in ministry. It's all we ever talk about in coaching. It's all we ever talk about in the quiet time of our life. Letting go. It sounds easy, and yet we still struggle with it. Step 2 is what the late anthropologist Victor Turner defined as the gap, the threshold, the space in between the old and what is to be. Step 3 is what is to be. It's what he called the rebirth, the re-entry into what you already know. It's the reason I chose this very daily word. What I may seem to be learning is, in fact, what I already know in my heart and soul. I am merely reattuning myself to the wisdom of Spirit. I am merely getting back into alignment with that which my heart and soul already knows, but somehow I've lost my way. That's the threshold. Brene talks a lot in her book, of course, about how we communicate in our world and on our planet in business, in our parenting, in our communication with one another. What I'd like to do today is turn that just a little bit and talk about the gap or the gaps in our spiritual life. There was a professor who was teaching a class of philosophy. And one day he walked into his classroom at the university, and he laid out several items on his lectern at the front of the stage. And it included a large mason jar, a pile of rather large rocks, about that big around, a pile of little bitty pebbles and gravel, and then a pile of sand. And without uttering a word, he began to pick up those large rocks and fill the mason jar. And he filled it all the way to the neck, and then he put a few more on top. The lid wouldn't go on. And he held it up, and he said, "Class, tell me, is this jar full?" And the class said yes. He put it back down, and he grabbed the pebbles, and he began to put those in the gaps around the bigger rocks. And he shook the jar until they settled in the bottom, and he kept doing that for a minute. And he picked it up, and he said, "Class, is it full?" They said, "Yeah, now it's really full." And then he reached over for the sand, and he began to sprinkle that all over. And he just kept doing that and shaking the jar until it would settle, and more sand, and held it up and asked, "Is it full?" They were a little tired of the question by now. But that was the end of his lesson for the day. And he passed out a handout, and it said this: "The mason jar is an analogy for life. The rocks that I put in first are the most important things in life: good health, relationship, your spouse, your partner, your children. All the things that make life complete." He explained that the pebbles are compared to the things that make your life comfortable, things like your home, your job, your car, your cell phone. And then he finally explained the sand is all the small stuff that doesn't seem to matter until it does. You've heard the phrase, "Don't sweat the small stuff." And it's all small stuff, and it all matters to a degree. Those 3 stages of transformation that I talked about, let me explain to you what we understand in unity that comes from one of our Unity co-founders, Charles Fillmore. In the first stage of letting go, Charles Fillmore said in the Revealing Word, the Dictionary of Metaphysical Terms, erasing from consciousness thoughts contrary to truth. That was his definition of letting go. Erasing from consciousness thoughts contrary to truth. You notice I just did that as if consciousness only resides here. Where does consciousness actually reside? In every cell of our being, all over the place, right? Thoughts contrary to truth in consciousness, individually and collectively. That second step of transformation, the dwelling in the threshold, is really important. It's what this entire chapter of the book and everything about your spiritual walk is all about. But we don't like to be there. That threshold moment, the void, the gap. But look what our friends across the pond have said over and over, painted in big bright letters everywhere. Mind it. Be aware of it. We call it mindfulness work. Pay attention. So today I want to ask you, in your spiritual walk, in your spiritual life, it matters not who you are or where you are on that path. What are the gaps? You may think, well, I don't have any. We all have them, and it's not a bad thing to have. It's all about what you're doing with the gaps that matter. I was in Joplin yesterday with my friend Ann. We own a business together. We often meet when I'm coming to Springfield for business meetings. We often meet at a regular hangout that serves really great Mexican food. And we so often meet there that I know the menu as well as the waiter does. It's 4 pages long. We have already circled all the misspellings in it. We know exactly where everything is in that menu. And as the waiter came to take our order, he said, "Are you ready to place your order?" And we both said, "No, we need a few minutes." Did I mention we've been there 100 times? A few minutes later, he comes back and says, "You ready to order?" We're looking at the menu as if we've never seen it before. And we say, 2 more minutes. We send him back. 2 more minutes, he comes back. "Are you ready to place your order?" First, I'm getting really clear on what I don't want before I tell you what I do want. And even though I have not eaten meat in over 10 years, I'm on the page full of meat, getting really clear that I don't want chicken. Getting really clear that this particular thing on the menu is too many carbs, that this particular thing isn't good for me, that this particular thing doesn't have enough cheese on it for me. I got really clear on what I didn't want before I would tell him what I did want. Does that make sense? Guess what? That's okay. It's what we do. There's no need to curse that away. There's no need to bask in that anymore. It's just who we are as human beings. And you have heard the phrase that you are a human being, but more than that, you are a spiritual being living a human existence. I'm here to tell you today that more than that, you are a vibrational being living a spiritual existence through human form. Everything is vibration. That which you touch, that which you hear, that which you see, it's all vibration. The sounding bowl, did you feel the vibration that went through the room? So we sing the songs, every thought a prayer. That's vibration, going out, summoning that back unto us. So the gap or gaps in your spiritual walk, let's get in touch with it vibrationally for a moment. It's not something that you can necessarily see or touch or hear or smell or taste. It is something, however, that you can feel. And it may be something that you can only feel in the absence of your knowing. Does that make sense? You feel like you should have it, but you don't. Victor Turner said that that time in the threshold, in the gap, is the time between no longer and not yet. In my transformational coaching, I tell clients it is this understanding of not that and not yet. That served me really well, but I don't want it anymore. Or it's time for me to move, or whatever reason or condition you put on it. It's not that anymore. And it's not yet this thing that has yet to be materialized or manifested by the evidence of my seeing it, hearing it, tasting it, touching it. So I'm stuck somewhere in the middle. What are you going to do in the middle? What are you doing in the threshold of your spiritual walk? They say that patience is a virtue. I get that. But patience is not necessarily your ability to wait. But patience is really about how you act and what you're doing in the waiting. Let me say that again. Patience isn't your ability to wait. It's how you're being in your waiting. Isn't that powerful? In that time of meditation that we did earlier today, or that you will do throughout your existence on this plane, it is that place of getting into the feeling, the response, the responsibility, your response to Spirit's ability of whatever it is that you're praying for or about. The entire universe is vibration, and though we often like to say, you are this spiritual being, it's really important to get clear that you are a vibrational being. In the threshold of whatever this experience in your spiritual walk is, and it might be that you are between one relationship and another, whether that's a relationship of your childhood or a relationship on a romantic level, whatever it might be. It might be a relationship of you and you, if you will. It might be that you notice you are moving from one season of your life into a next season, that you are moving from one career into a new career, from one educational path into a greater educational path. Whatever the case is, what is happening right here in the void? As we look at letting go from this perspective, it's important to realize that letting go is different from surrender. That much different. But that much is like the sand in the mason jar. It's everything. See, I could move from this room into your room, but I'd have to let go of all this stuff in order to get there. And in that threshold moment, I surrender not only all the stuff there, but I surrender unto the unknown of what will be. Surrender is this reciprocal thing. I surrender that which was, and I surrender not knowing, or my control, or rather my illusion of control of what will be. This kind of work may mean getting insight into one of the great reasons that letting go is so difficult. It means giving up that control, that thing that we cling to so much. It's no wonder we don't want to let go when our idea of God is that God is rather small and finite and definitive, weak, controllable by us. And so instead of embracing a bigger and more miraculous concept of God, we end up facing life all alone, trying to control a concept of the divine. Dr. Wayne Dyer says, each experience in your life was absolutely necessary in order to have gotten you to the next place and the next step up until this very moment. What we feel from this understanding of wanting or praying is a vibration. You might call it yearning or longing for. It's this vibration that we just know, I don't have it yet, but I really want it. You've seen me do that thing I do with letting it go one way or the other. You've heard me talk about letting go ad nauseum. What Brené Brown says in her book is that there's strategy and there's culture. Strategy is the game plan. It's step A, B, C. Culture is less about what we want to achieve and more about who we are in the achieving of it. And again, that threshold moment seems like it's really small. I told you earlier, read your Bible, just don't take it too seriously. Because in unity, we don't look at it from a literal standpoint all the time, but a metaphysical standpoint. And metaphysically, interestingly enough, the word Egypt, which shows up countless times in the Old Testament, metaphysically is translated as the narrow place, the threshold. The Israelites journeyed through the desert of Egypt. How long? 40 years. That's a long time. You want to be in the threshold of this for 40 years? No. But 40 in metaphysics is completion. It's done. They did it until they were done doing it. And so, however long it takes, whatever you're doing in the doing of it, get in touch with what you're feeling in the place of the threshold of the void. Here's what I've come to notice. She talks about it in her book in getting clear about what your values are. I have on my website what my values are. They are peace, dignity, joy, gratitude. When you get in touch with what your values are, you have a touchstone in the void. Now, can I produce to you right now so that you could physically see it, hear it, taste it, touch it, peace or gratitude or joy? No, it's a vibration, right? You know what it is here. Getting in touch with what your values are means everything in the void. Because in the void, you begin to trust, you begin to grow, you can rest. I made it to Springfield last night, and the hotel was completely full. I don't know who was there, but they were very loud. And I don't know what church they were going to this morning, but it seems they needed to be up at 5 o'clock this morning, blow drying their hair for it. And so, in the void of later today, I will rest, because I've been up a long time. Rest is a big part of self-care, obviously. So it's interesting that in the void or the threshold of our experiences, we keep trying to push our way. We keep trying to microwave everything. We want instantaneous results. We want it to be done. But part of it is just the being in it, resting there for a while. Scripture says, fix your eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. It's everything. And no matter who you are, where you are, this mystery of life is full of the gaps. It may be the space between who you are today and who you will be tomorrow. It may mean moving from one level of understanding prosperity to a greater understanding of abundance. It may mean a lot of things for your individual life, but it also means a lot of things for the collective good. And in the gap, you can find that there is purpose. That's something I can't produce to you that you can see with your physical eyes or hear with your physical ears, but it's real. And in the physical gap of life, you come to understand that the purpose is all about growth and healing and truth. What are you growing? What are you healing? Your soul. who and what you are. You come to know in this threshold, in this void, the one power and one presence that we speak about every Sunday on every stage throughout the entire world in unity. But in the gap, you get to understand that you are an expression of that one power and one presence. That's a heavy responsibility. And it's everything. We create not just as individuals, but as groups. We are all connected to that one power, one presence. In unity, we call it the one mind. And as spiritual beings making footprints on the grounds of this earth, we are well acquainted with the cycles of birth and death. The letting go feels like physical death sometimes. It feels like spiritual death sometimes. It entails a death of some kind. And endlessly, we participate in each of those cycles, just as one day we will relinquish this physical body to whatever lies in wait for us. But anything that annoys you, as I felt sitting in your chair, anything that annoys you is teaching you patience. Anyone who abandons you is teaching you how to stand on your own 2 feet. Anything that angers you is teaching you more about forgiveness and compassion. Anything that has power over you is teaching you how to take your power back and claim it as your rightful birthright. Anything that has that power over you brings you back into attunement or alignment with that which you already know. And anything that you can't control is just teaching you to let go all the more. Anything that you fear is teaching you more about unconditional love. And unconditional love says, I want so much to be the love that is me that I'm going to find a way of looking beyond the circumstances and situations of my life, looking beyond the rocks and the pebbles, even beyond the sand itself, so that I could just see a jar that was first empty and yet complete as it was. So when you go to explain to your non-unity friends this afternoon what you learned in church, you can tell them, well, we learned that I co-create my reality, but I was told to ignore it completely. I was told that there is one presence and one power in all of the universe, but I'll never see or taste or touch or hear necessarily the voice of God, but I will feel it if I'm quiet. Because it's in the quiet, in the void, in the threshold, in the space between not that and not yet, that we have the opportunity to just be quiet and listen. To listen with our heart and soul, where we trust that beyond the absence there is a presence, that beyond the pain there is a healing, that beyond the brokenness there is wholeness, that beyond hurting there is forgiveness, that beyond the silence there is a spirit always speaking in a still small voice and whispering, come, it's safe here. Come, this is where your growth lies. Come, trust. It's in that space that we can get in touch with that voice, hear that voice, feel that voice from a vibrational standpoint, and be able to express just what Joe said in the song earlier, our answer. Yes, God, yes, I will trust. I will go. I will be. My answer is yes. Thank you for having me. Namaste.